Good evening. My name is John Liao. I'm the Director of Government Relations at CPS Energy. Thank you for joining us this evening. Morning Glen neighborhood, members of our community, customers, we're very thankful that you joined us. We're joined today by Councilman Perry, certainly an advocate of the district. We are here to provide a solution, an understanding of what has happened to the Morning Glen subdivision, what our plan is for the short, mid, and long term, how you're going to be communicated with, the timeline for us to provide the solution, how we're going to do it, and what it means to you and how you can talk to us during this. We've got a dedicated phone line that's available to you right now. It is 210-353-2783. If you would like to communicate personally with a customer response unit member who's waiting for your phone call to help you. And also there's a Q&A feature that's available to you that we have reps standing by to help discuss whatever your issue might be in specificity. Again, we're going to talk about a number of things today. We're joined by Councilman Clayton Perry, Rick Lopez, the Senior Director of Engineering, Dan Macias, who will talk to us about safety, and then we'll have a question and answer session at the end. I'd like to take a moment to pass it to Councilman Perry for any opening remarks he may have.
Hey, thank you, John. Appreciate it. And thank you, everybody, for joining. I was getting calls from your neighborhood from different people saying that we've got some problems here with electricity. And we talked with CPS about arranging this call and getting the information out on what's happening, what's going to happen, and try to take care of these issues, the intermittent outages that y'all are having over there and longer outages as well. So I'm really glad that CPS was able to pull this together. They got out there and put some signs up in your neighborhood announcing this meeting, along with, we put it in Nextdoor and Facebook and all that. So we've tried to get it out to as many people as possible and get this information out so we don't continue to get those calls from, bits and pieces from the neighborhood. Get everybody together. And if someone was not able to attend this call, John, I think y'all are recording this thing that people should be able to go and take a look at that if they missed the meeting or couldn't make it, so that you can go back and take a look at that and understand what's going on. So with that, I just want to say happy holidays and Merry Christmas. I've been in this suit all day long. Today was the last council meeting before the Christmas break. So I've been here all day in this and just trying to spread the cheer a little bit. Lord knows we need a lot of that right now after this year, and hopefully this next year will be brighter and better for us, and we can get back to more of a normal way of life. So with that, thank you very much for attending, and John, if you can take it away. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilman. I'd like to repeat the phone number again in case you would like to reach out to us and talk to someone personally. That is 210-353-2783. Again, we're able to answer questions live through our question and answer feature in WebEx, and we'd be happy to take your call. Now, I'd like to turn it over to and introduce Rick Lopez. Rick has been with us for a number of years, is a seasoned engineer, and has worked across a number of business units within our organization. Rick has a plan that he and his team have worked on to provide, as I said, short, mid, and long-term solutions. Rick, the floor is yours.
So the agenda for this presentation is to go through the purpose of why we're here, to talk about the outage history in the Morning Glen neighborhood, and also to talk about the underground electric system that serves this neighborhood. We'll go through the reliability improvement plan and timeline that we have in place, and then there will be some time afterwards for some Q&A. So the purpose of this meeting, and we touched on it a little bit already, but again, to acknowledge the fact that, we know that there have been power outages going on out here. I think the outages that you are experiencing that are the most problematic have been those that are caused by failures in your underground system that feed your neighborhood. So again, not acceptable by any means on our part. And so we are doing everything we can to address those issues. And we'll talk more about that throughout the presentation. So we are committed to taking care of this problem with this electrical system. And again, we want to go through and share with you the actual plan itself for trying to get there. And so this slide, this is just for anybody, not residents necessarily of Morning Glen. This is just really serves as a location map for those maybe that are listening in from the CPS Energy side, or anybody else that curious about where the Morning Glen subdivision is located. Really just a reference map. So on this slide, what I'd like to do is cover the types of outages and the types of issues that we have tracked and documented in terms of those that are creating outages for your neighborhood. And what we have identified on here are the underground cable failures that have caused outages for Morning Glen. And last year in 2019, we had an outage in October 18th. And typically when we have underground cable failures, you're going to see an extended outage. And you can see, if you look at the column on the far right, all of these outages extend into hours of outage time. And so that's the downside when our underground cables fail, is it takes us a while to identify where they're located and then be able to replace them. I'm sorry, not replace them, but repair them or switch loads around in order to be able to get power back on. And so when you have as many outages as we see here from September 10th through December the 12th, we had 6 different cable failures in your neighborhood that really, again, as I continue to say, and I really mean this, that that is not acceptable. And so these things normally don't fail. Underground cables typically do not fail at this rate in any given subdivision. So this is very unusual. We do have it every now and then, but it's not a common occurrence. And so when these cables started to fail on us, we did begin immediately working on some engineering plans to be able to start addressing some of these issues. But this is the history, total of 6 this year and 7 in the last 12 months. So why don't we move? Oh, I'm sorry. One other point I wanted to make here. The neighborhood is also susceptible to outages that are experienced by problems on the overhead electric system, because the underground in your neighborhood is just that. It's in your neighborhood. But once you get outside your neighborhood, the underground system is connected to the overhead lines that go back to our substations. And so there have been other outages experienced besides these. And so we just want to be fully transparent. This is not all the outages that you have seen in this neighborhood, but these are the ones that have really been causing the problems for you, especially over the last 3 months. So a little bit about this underground system. It was installed in the 1983-1984 timeframe, and the cables that are in the ground today were installed in excavated trenches and then covered back up, what we refer to as direct buried. So these cables have been in the ground for quite a few years, and any repairs or replacements that have to be performed to these cables always require excavation. We always have to dig them back up, basically, and either repair them or dig a new trench to lay or install new conduit and new cable in order to replace them entirely. And so that kind of leads to the next bullet on this slide. Our current standard, since about the mid-'80s, we transitioned to installing our cable in a conduit system. And so essentially that's what we're going to be doing out here in your neighborhood. And in fact, we've already started. We will open up trenches basically in the same route that the current cables exist. We will go out and excavate, lay conduit in the ground, and then pull cable through it. This is a much more reliable way of doing things. And so we've been doing this again since the mid-'80s, and it definitely has proven to be more reliable than the old way we used to do things, where we just laid the cables directly in the ground. And then also, if a cable does fail, there's no need to dig it back up. We simply pull the cable out of the conduit and pull a new one back in. And so for several reasons, it's a much better system for installing underground cables in your neighborhoods. So out in Morning Glen, back in 2007, and then again in 2012, we did perform some work, what we call cable injection, that was intended to help improve the reliability of these underground cables in your neighborhood. And so we weren't able to get to all the cables, but we got to most of them. And so this process that we implemented injects or pumps an insulating fluid into the cables themselves. And what this does, and was intended to do, is it extends the life of the cable by improving the insulation on the cable itself. And so this is a technology that has been around for about 20 years. And we tried it, and we did see a lot of success with it. And unfortunately, out here, we were finding that the injection process did not work as well because of the failures that we are seeing. That tells us that something is not working as well here with that injection system. We were hoping to get a lot more life out of these cables as a result of that process, but again, we are not realizing that to be the case. So our reliability improvement plan, we are going to look at replacing all of the underground cables in your neighborhood with new cables and conduit. As I mentioned, a much better process, a much better system for installation of underground cables. The transformers, or the green boxes in some of your backyards throughout the neighborhood, will also be replaced as needed. Some of them have already been replaced over the years, just like some of the cables have been replaced over the years. So those that have not been replaced, we will go ahead and address those while we're doing this work. Our contractor, BCOM, will be performing this work, and they will do this work jointly with CPS Energy crews. You will predominantly be seeing the BCOM crews out here. They will be doing all of the excavation. They will be doing all of the conduit work and pulling all the cables in, and then CPS Energy crews will be responsible for doing the electrical connections once all of that other work has been done. Now, this work started on November 27th and is expected to be completed by the end of March in 2021. The excavation will be required mostly in backyards. And again, that's the only way we can replace these cables. We have to get back in there and retrench and reinstall new facilities pretty much all over again. Now, as part of this process, because there's a lot of excavation and because we have to get in your backyards in order to do this work, we will be providing advanced notifications so that you know when we're going to be there. And you can make arrangements if you have to, put a dog away, or if you have a gate that needs to be unlocked. We will coordinate with you in advance to ensure that you are aware that we will be needing to get access into your property, and so that you can make the proper arrangements. We will also be providing advanced notification if there are any planned outages that are needed or that will be affecting your particular residence throughout this project. And throughout the project, there will be a need for temporary or intermittent planned outages. And this is strictly to be able to de-energize portions of the system as we do work on it for the safety of the crews. So you will get advance notice. We strive to give you 24 hours advance notice. This is typically done by hanging a notice on your door. So you may be on the lookout for that. And that should tell you the date that we're going to be either needing to access your yard or needing to subject you to a planned outage. And it will give you more information and a phone number that you can call if you have questions. So here is the current timeline for this project, for this work. And so right now, I mentioned earlier that at least since September, we have had 6 cable failures in your neighborhood, but 2 of those cable failures were actually on the same cable. So 4 separate cables have been affected. 2 of those 4 actually had double failures. They failed, and then we re-energized them, and then they failed again, a short time later. So this here is first going to show on this slide for those first 4 cables that failed, the status of the replacement of those first 4. And so the first one was located in the rear lots of Morning Ridge. And this for this one, a new cable and conduit has been installed and energized. So that segment of cable, the old segment of cable, has already been replaced with the new cable. Now, between Morning Path and Country Morning, BCOM is currently coordinating with affected homeowners for access to their yards, and trenching should have started today. That was the plan, and I assume that took place today, that they were able to get started. And the estimated cable and conduit installation date will be 12/21, which is next Monday. And then the cables will be energized. The schedule for the energizing of the cables is on 12/22. So we have two cables that failed that are behind or in between Morning Creek and Morning Trail. And this new cable and conduit has been installed. However, it has not been energized yet. And right now we are coordinating to make arrangements to get that cable energized. It could be energized as early as tomorrow or no later than next Tuesday, 12/22. And then once we get those 4 failed cable segments replaced, our plan is to continue throughout the rest of the neighborhood and replace all of the remaining direct buried cables. Now that work has not started yet. Again, we want to get the first 4 failed cables replaced first. And then once that's done, our crews will continue on with replacing the rest of the cables in your neighborhood. And again, the estimated completion for that work is March of 2021. So this may be a little difficult to read, but the intent here was to show the overall underground cable system as it runs throughout your neighborhood. And so this was really just to make you aware that we do have this overall map. We may already, in fact, have a web page on our website where we will be able to provide this map, and it will give you just a better way to see the status of the project as it progresses all the way through completion. It is color coded, and cables that are still direct buried will be shown in one color, and cables that have already been replaced will be shown in a different color, so that you can see as the project progresses, you will start to see more and more cables being indicated as cable and conduit. And this slide here is just a zoomed in view. And in fact, we went ahead and cut the subdivision into thirds. This is kind of the northern third of the subdivision, just to show, for example, if you look at the color coding and the routing of the cable, you will see 3 colors on the screen. You see some blue color towards the bottom. You see magenta color, kind of intermittent on the rest of the route. And then you see a couple of sections in here that are shown in a red color. So each of these indicate something different. The blue indicates that it is still direct buried. The magenta color is an existing primary cable and conduit. It's already somewhere in the past, it must have failed and was already replaced. And the red cables, the ones shown in red, are those that we are currently working on addressing that recently failed. And so I won't go through the rest of this. It's the same thing. It's just, again, providing you a little better view for your portion of the neighborhood. This is kind of the center or middle portion of the neighborhood. This here is the bottom or the southern portion of the neighborhood. Again, just showing the current status of cables as they exist today. And this is my last slide. One of the things we wanted to, be very transparent about, and you may have already noticed it just by the work that has already been going on in the neighborhood, with the work that we've been doing since the end of November. And that is that this work can be fairly messy. There's a lot of cutting that is done. The picture on the left is an example of what it looks like if we have to do the excavation along the street. And in your case, there will be some street cutting, but the majority of it will be in rear yards and backyards. And the picture on the right shows an example of what that might look like. And again, it's messy, it's dirty, and our crews will do their best to minimize the impact to your yards. However, they do have to dig through there, and they do have to move equipment in there. So we ask that you bear with us. This is all a necessary part of doing this cable replacement to ensure the reliability of your neighborhood. And one final comment on the pictures here. This work is not work that is taking place in Morning Glen. This work here is from projects that have occurred, in the past, maybe in the last few years or longer. This was really just to kind of set the expectation of what, you might see, as our crews continue to work throughout your neighborhood. But obviously, our crews, whether they be our BCOM contract crews or our internal CPS Energy crews, will all be following CDC recommended guidelines in terms of social distancing, in terms of mask wearing, and anything else to ensure your safety as well as the safety of the crews themselves. So that ends my presentation. John, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Thank you, Rick. I appreciate that. What we're going to do is we're going to hold questions for a moment because part of the work that we're going to be doing, we want to stress the safety for our customers, the community, our employees. So I'm going to welcome Dan Macias. He's part of the public safety and education team. And Dan's going to take a moment to talk about some safety practices. Dan?
Thank you, John. This evening, I want to share a valuable safety message for all customers in our service area. CPS Energy crews and our contractors work in many different areas throughout town. Our work sites can vary from roadsides, new construction sites, and neighborhoods to include some customers' easements. Remember, anytime you are around a work site, be cautious of your surroundings and stay away from an active work area. Our employees and contractors will follow proper safety guidelines. For example, every excavation requires a line location to determine if electric and gas lines may be in the area. Areas of excavation are marked off with barrier tape and covered with wood planks when crews temporarily suspend work. Underground electric service maintenance sometimes creates outages for our customers. If opportunity allows, our crews will reduce the outage time by installing above-ground temporary electric lines. These lines are inserted into a conduit for enhanced safety and are clearly identified to improve visual awareness. Please avoid these lines and do not attempt to move them. If work is required in your easement, our crews will inform you of what to expect during the course of our electric service rehabilitation. Thank you.
Dan, good job. Thank you for that. And again, for everybody who will be impacted by this, please take safety seriously. We will cover the area, as Dan mentioned, while we do work. Beacon will be our contractor going from, doing the excavation and the installation, and then our team will come in and make the transformer connections. So now, Councilman, if you allow us, we'll do some question and answer. We've got a few questions coming in, and so I'll ask Rick to come back on video. And here's just a couple of questions. Rick, one of the questions is, what about my service from the house to the transformer? Will that be affected?
Okay, so as far as the cable from the transformer to the house, the electric service cable, when we do these types of projects, we typically do not replace those. And the reason for that is the experience that we have had in terms of the reliability of those cables has been very different than the reliability of the other cables, our primary cables, as we call them, the high voltage cables. So as part of this program, and we've been doing this for, since the late 80s, we have not replaced the electric service cables as a part of the program. Those, again, have proven to be much more reliable and have not needed to be replaced.
In general, Rick, we've got questions that come in sometimes with regard to if the system sees a fault, the customer may hear a boom or a click. That's typically the transformer or the circuit operating. Could you describe that a little bit, what they're hearing and how there's not a safety concern with that? That's actually the system working for us.
Yeah, so, and that is another good question. However, normally the noise that you're going to hear, and it sounds like a cannon, a loud boom, what we have is fuses at the pole where the underground starts, where the underground taps into the overhead system, and where it transitions to go underground en route throughout the neighborhood. We have a fuse at that location. And just like fuses inside your home, we have fuses on our electric system. However, when those blow, If you've ever heard a fuse or observed a fuse as it blows, in your home, you might hear a little spark, you might hear a little noise. But when you think about the amount of energy involved with the high voltage electric system, what you're hearing is the same thing, just magnified, by many, many, orders of magnitude. So that really is what you're hearing, is the fuse itself. Now, one more comment on that. That fuse is located on top of the pole. So when that happens, it's not anywhere near anybody, anybody who's happening to be in the area should not be worried about anything in terms of safety. That occurs up at the top of the pole.
Thanks, Rick. A theme that we're getting on questions is about landscaping and gardens. Could you describe a little bit of our ability to leave things as we found them?
Yes, another good question, because yes, with the excavation, obviously we will be tearing up sod, and depending on the type of or the amount of landscaping throughout the easement and along the route, we may have to trim or even remove existing shrubbery. And so whatever the case may be, the way we approach this is, as John mentioned, we want to leave your yard as close as possible to its original condition. So if we tear out some sod, we will go in there and make sure that we redo the sod, so that and then of course it's going to need some time to grow back. But our intention is to leave it as close to possible in the original condition that we found it when we first started working there.
Thank you, Rick. And let's see what else we have in our Q&A section. Here's a question about it's the east side of Morning Creek. Our backyard has been surveyed for installing conduit. When can we expect conduit to be installed? So that probably is one of the middle set diagram of your section of the neighborhood. Presumably that's 2 months leading into January and February. Is that correct?
Well, what I would say is, right now, what we do know is that the active work is happening on those 4 sections that we put on that construction timeline slide. So those areas, and we could even pull up the map and try to identify on the map. I'm not sure how helpful that will be on here, but specific locations other than those 4 that we have already identified, those will be part of the larger overall project to replace all cables in the neighborhood. And we do not have a sequencing of that work at this time. But that's part of what we will end up doing, is trying to provide as much notice as we continue moving through the project, trying to provide updates on our website so that you can see where the work has already been done and which way it's going. But it's something that our contractors coordinate once they're on site, and they determine the best routes and the best sequencing to minimize outages and to speed up, the entire process, to really to get out of your neighborhood as quickly as possible, so that your lives can go back to normal and they don't have to be working in there and continuing to do their excavation.
Rick, and possibly for the Beacon team that's with us, wet weather, storms, and conditions could put a delay or a slowing of our timeline down a bit, but it's our intention to get this done as quickly as we can, correct?
Yes, that is definitely correct. Again, we understand, one, that you have had more outages than you should have been subjected to. So we want to get, we've got Beacon in there today, and we're even working on adding additional crews to help speed up the process. But things like weather can slow us down. If things get too muddy, we don't want to be trampling through muddy areas, because it can become a safety issue for the crew members, but also it becomes, it creates a bigger mess for the customer, and equipment is kind of harder to get in there sometimes. So when we can work, we will work. And if we just get into a situation where weather or other issues prevent us from getting in there to do the work, we will have to take, a day or 2 off in order to allow things to dry out and allow us for better access.
Thanks, Rick. We're getting a few questions that are coming in very, very personalized for the address. I want to make sure everybody knows that we will be answering all of these questions this evening, and we'll be working with the team to answer all of those in the Q&A feature today. I also want to make sure that our customers understand, and Rick, you could probably explain this better than I, that while we make these connections, right, to disengage with the direct buried conduit, and once we put in the new, we are going to have sustained outages intermittently in order to make that work done safely. Could you talk about the duration of some of those intermittent outages?
Sure. So yes, again, because we are replacing the existing cable with the new cable, we have to at some point de-energize or remove the old cable and connect the new one. So there are outages associated with that work. They could range anywhere from 15 minutes, possibly up to 30 minutes to an hour. But again, those are not the same as the outages that we showed on the slide, where you could be looking at 4, 5, 6, 7-hour outages. And then those outages are unexpected. In this case, you will get advance notice. The outages will be of shorter duration. And we only take the outages when we have to in order to be able to perform the work safely.
I do want to remind customers that are on the phone with us tonight or on the WebEx that you can call 210-353-2783 to speak with someone. Reminder, we are going to answer all the questions again before the evening is over. And this presentation and conversation is being recorded. We will put it on our engagement page website, probably no later than midday tomorrow. So all the material will be available on our website, maps included, for you to look at your leisure and when you have time. Let me go through a couple more questions. Again, we'll get to everybody's questions, and why don't we go with this one. Rick, you mentioned earlier direct cable was a very prominent feature in engineering practice standard for many, many, many years. That has changed. And so this occurrence is not uncommon across any service territory where the electric provider is. In your experience, tell us about just in general other places that we've experienced this, and this is the same remedy that we would have done then too.
Yes, that's correct. So just to give a little background, back in the early days of undergrounding for residential neighborhoods, for new residential neighborhoods, which started back in the 60s, the industry as a whole was installing all of their cables in this, what we call direct buried fashion. That was the industry standard. And what we found out within the first 20 years was that the cables were not lasting near as long as we had expected that they would, and that our cable manufacturers had promoted that they would. But as an industry, as we continue to evolve, we learn these things. And so, and I won't say that every utility has standardized on cable and conduit. There are some utilities that still do direct buried. And so that's an interesting thing. They are the exception and not the rule. Most utilities do install their cable and conduit like we do today. But some utilities just look at they'll look at the cost and determine that they'd rather, cut some cost out on the front end, and then they'll deal with the issues later when the reliability issues come up. But again, we have learned that that doesn't work for us, right? We've got to provide the best reliability possible. And we believe that is the only way to do that is to go to this cable and conduit system. And I will also share with you that our experience since we transitioned to that approach has definitely demonstrated the much higher reliability levels of those systems.
I want to remind folks that they can see this presentation in its entirety at cpsenergy.com/morningglen. That's cpsenergy.com/morningglen to find this information directly on our CPS Energy website. Kelvin, I'd like to turn it to you now, closing comments, and provide you an opportunity to address the Morning Glen community.
Sure. Thank you, John. I did put a question up there. I said, will any of this work be contracted out, or will we be doing this all in-house?
Yes, sir. So This work is all of the infrastructure, all of the excavation, all of that type of work will be contracted out to this contractor, BCOM. And so they do the majority of the work. They do what I would call all the dirty work, all the dirt work, trenching, excavation. And then once they have completed all of that work, our crews come in at the end and make the connections. We do the electrical work. And so that's generally how this project will go.
I want to say thank you very much to CPS for working to put this little presentation together. I think there's some valuable information in this. I want to, thank those people that have been calling in saying, "Hey, what is going on with our neighborhood?" And that's what spurred this on. Let's get everybody or as many people together, get it all out there at one time so that the neighborhood knows what's going on, or you can tell your neighbor if they weren't able to be on this call to go and look at this online. We will also post this on my Facebook page and on our on Nextdoor and try to get this information out as much as possible. But I just want to assure everybody in Morning Glen that this is high on our priority list to get this stuff corrected and fixed and have y'all on the rest of the grid where we have very few outages here in this particular area in town. I get very few outages even when the worst storms hit, and I've been very, very pleased with the service that CPS offers us. And I know y'all have had a bit of a rough time, but I feel certain that CPS is going to pull this out and do this as quickly as possible to everybody's satisfaction. So thank you again, CPS, for putting this together and for getting this information out. I really appreciate it. Thank you, neighbors, for hanging in there with this also.
Thank you, Councilman. And on behalf of myself, the team that Dan, those that are on the line, Adrian, who's facilitated us in the background, thank you for allowing us this opportunity to address the community. We'll stay a little longer, answer questions in the Q&A feature. And again, our phone number is 210-353-2783 for any direct questions. Thank you so much, everybody, and have a great evening and happy holidays.